Welcome to Pop-O-Holics, the show about hot takes, hotter than pancakes, but we're in the business of hunting Nazis. And cousin, business is a booming. If this is your first time coming to Pop-O-Holics, we come together to talk about an artist, a legacy, music, movies, mostly movies, some TV shows. We don't care. Video games. We don't care. We talk about anything on this show. And this month, in the next coming month, we're talking all Tarantino leading up to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This week's episode is Inglourious Basterds. And I'm brought today. Today I'm here with my best friends, my compatriots, my Inglorious Basterds. Live in the studio, we have
Chris Conkling
and Brian Dupree.
Oh, guys, I'm looking you in. I can feel your body heat.
We got energy.
We got the live energy. We're here. We got the new setup. Things are good. This is great. It's so good to have you.
And we're definitely not Nazis.
We are not.
This is totally the first take. Like we're real smooth with all this.
This is an anti-Nazi podcast. If you're a Nazi, get out.
Just leave.
Just leave.
We don't want you.
You see the door. Walk out of it.
But leave a 5-star review before you go.
So this week, we are talking about Inglourious Basterds. Quentin Tarantino's might be my masterpiece. Might be a masterpiece. Is it? What are our thoughts? Well, we'll find out after we get to our news. We move on to what we've been consuming for the week. We talk about our weekly poll, and then we go into the main topic. So we're going to start this week off the way that we always do with Brian's Wacky News Corner.
Okay, guys, so some huge news, and this number will have grown by the time of release, but Avengers Endgame has finally surpassed Avatar as the highest grossing film of all time.
Guys, we did it.
We made it.
Everybody pat yourself on the back. Nerds have won.
It's pretty unbelievable, and the current number, as of this recording, is $2,782,984,193. Not a small sum.
That's a lot of money.
Notable fact, about 3% of that was from Chris rewatching it several times in the theater, and the impending lawsuit from from stealing it.
Let's not talk about that. Let's just gloss over that.
The lawyer
right
is
now.
telling us to cut the
Stop.
mics.
Don't say that. Don't say. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, we'll edit that out.
Chris is a thief.
I got nothing.
So what's the number again?
It is just shy of 2 billion and 3/4 of the third billion.
200 million.
I feel like it would have been easier just
number.
to read the number again.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't want to walk people through that. You can look up the number. It's going to be bigger. And once another Avengers movie come out, they may put more. They may re-release again. So this movie's only going to go up from here. We're all excited for it. We covered a whole month of this. And Comic-Con is, as we record, still going on and dropping news as we speak. And I'm going to quickly run through a giant list of a bunch of new TV shows and movies.
One thing I will say
about
the sorry to cut you off, Brian, but one thing I will say about the accomplishment of Endgame reaching where it's at is that it kind of is apropos of modern cinema that Avatar started this idea that you could film everything in a green screen.
True.
And Endgame is the culmination of where that's taken us, and I think the most positive ways. I spoke out on bonus ep about Spider-Man, my problems with CG. However, I think James Cameron invented technologies as he ought to do, as James Cameron does. He invented technologies that have been used in visual effects, and it makes perfect sense that Endgame is kind of the culmination of and handing off the torch from where that was.
Sure, and similar to Endgame, James Cameron's newest movie will probably take about 10 years to get there. So
except it won't have any
up.
movies before it.
No, except for the one that currently held the record.
I won't be surprised if Cameron comes out and he's like, so tonight when you go to sleep, we're trying this new thing called Dreamwave technology, and you will all be watching Avatar 2, whether you like it or not.
I'm ready for it. I mean, I think I've seen some of those in some of my dreams, and fairly enjoyable.
With Neuralink.
Yeah. It's a Elon Musk and James Cameron collaboration, and
That's
we'll
a legit
keep you up
piece
to
of
date
news.
on that. This is definitely real news. Don't question us. Don't look up our sources.
All right, let's go through the Comic-Con announcements for Marvel.
Real quick list. We got the Eternals. We've got the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We've got Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, WandaVision, Loki, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Hawkeye, Thor, Love and Thunder, Black Widow, and Blade. So currently, as of literally 10 minutes ago, these are the most up-to-date announcements. And something I'm personally super excited about, and I must say, kind of called with a good friend of mine, Mahershala Ali is going to play Blade. And I'm super hyped about this news.
That is very, very exciting. I'm also very stoked about Mahershala Ali being Blade. I'm also really excited about the ridiculous title, Thor, Love and Thunder. I cannot wait to see what that movie's about.
It's about love and thunder. I don't know. It's about Thor.
Clearly, yeah.
And falling in love. He is thunder.
Dude, if Taika Waititi directs a romantic comedy with Thor, Natalie Portman, and Tessa Thompson,
A love triangle.
yeah.
Oh,
I hope Portman
I'm in for
and
it.
Tessa Thompson end up together. That would be ideal.
That would be great.
real right turn.
That's what I want for my money.
Hey,
For, progressivism.
get your $6.99 a month ready. Disney Plus will host all of the shows, and obviously the movies will be out in theaters. So
That sounds like the porn parody of Thor.
Love and Thunder.
It's pretty perfect. Anything else standing out on this upcoming list? I think it's very, we're getting a lot more diversity. We're getting our first Black Widow movie, which is interesting because of events of Endgame, as a lot of people have talked about. So a lot of the what would be it sounds so strange. It's like there's no Spider-Mans, obviously no Iron
Right.
Mans. There's no, it seems like a lot of these smaller stories that are going to be bigger in the MCU. I think it's really cool.
We've got multiverse in one of the names, so I'm thinking some kooky stuff is bound to happen
Yeah.
in this next release.
The Multiverse of Madness. That just sounds insane.
Which one is that?
That's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse
course.
of Madness. And that's also going to be starring Elizabeth Olsen, which means we will be getting a Doctor Strange Scarlet Witch film. That's pretty exciting.
They're a pretty good pair together.
Yeah, I feel like their powers will complement one another.
They both have very undescribed, seemingly unlimited power in the mystical realm. So maybe we'll finally figure out what it is that Scarlet Witch can do.
Everything.
Very powerful.
She could do whatever they need her to do. Kind of similar to Captain Marvel.
Deus Ex Marvel, as some have called her.
Yeah.
And I like the fact we're getting a Hawkeye movie, just called Hawkeye for now.
It's a Hawkeye television show.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's what that was. I was really confused when I just saw Hawkeye. I was hoping they'd call it Hawkeye.
Hawkeye. That's what they call him in the comic that I think this show is going to be based off of.
Yeah,
Call
they
him
should have just called it
Hawkeye.
Hawkeye. Yeah.
I think that would have been smart.
Yeah.
but-
One of the characters in that comic calls him Hawkeye.
What about Hawkeye, the hot guy?
Oh no. Intentionally tongue twisting.
Hawkeye, the hot guy coming to Disney Plus this spring.
That actually is the porn remake. I'm going to do a quick shout out to a new comic that's coming out today, House of X by Jonathan Hickman. Not sure about the current stance of X-Men in terms of the comics universe, but I'm excited for this. I've read a couple of things by Jonathan Hickman before, and I don't think he's been doing a lot of work recently. This was advertised in a few other comics that I was reading, and it was just largely before House of X was announced, I think only in the last month or so. It was just advertised as Hickman 2019, which honestly seemed pretty pretentious to me, but I was like, I'll probably read this thing, whatever it is, when it comes out. And I've been meaning to get back into some X-Men comics, so I'm
I already
excited
got
for
it
this one.
pre-ordered, so I will definitely be talking about this at some point in time.
Boom. We will have to read this together. And that'll lead us right into Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is coming out this week, guys. Tomorrow, you
The
can
reason
see this
for the
movie.
season.
The
It's
reason
finally
for the
happening.
season. So
We're going to
let's-
talk a
let's
little
move
bit
right
more
along.
about that later, but I'm pretty stoked, especially after revisiting the last 4 Tarantino films that we have, and especially after watching Inglourious Basterds. I'm ready. I'm super ready.
Me too.
We'll try to shout out some predictions later as far as how we think we're going to feel, and maybe we'll reflect on that after we watch the film. And that will be next week's episode. Before we get to Inglourious Basterds, though, we are going to hit up what we've been consuming with our quick hits. So let's get to it. Chris and Brian, you both saw Toy Story 4. Tell us about it.
We did. So I went to see Toy Story 4 this week with my wife and her friend. Well, I should say our friend. And let me tell you, I have not missed a Toy Story movie in theaters since the original came out in, 1995 or something like that?
94, I believe.
94. So I've been watching Toy Story since I was a child. I love these characters. I love watching their adventures. This movie was enjoyable, but I don't think it was necessary. I don't think it really added anything to the Toy Story mythos in any way. People I know said that they cried more during this movie than they did during Toy Story 3. I definitely got teary-eyed during this movie, but I was full-on sobbing in Toy Story 3 when that was in theaters. So, Brian, I'm going to hand it off to you because I want to hear how you felt. But that's kind of my position on Toy Story 4. Like an unnecessary addition to the Toy Story franchise. But fun nonetheless.
Yeah, I think it's hard to disagree with anything you're saying there. I'm going to go ahead and say I don't believe those people who said they cried more in this one than Toy Story 3. They didn't watch Toy Story 3, if that's the case. I also got, there was one moment of teary-eyed, nearly nostalgia, because I felt like they were trying to make this the end of the movie without any at the end of the series without any spoilers, the characters coming to terms with it. But it really felt like the people making this movie couldn't let the characters go and were just trying to get one last thing out to wrap it up. And I will say, this is the first movie that I knew about the Shining references in the Toy Story movies and I loved the Shining reference here. So I'll say it's worth seeing just for that. And it's got some good laughs. Forky, the new character, and the whole conceit of his character, I thought that was something that hadn't really been addressed deeply in the Toy Story universe. And it was a good addition. He was a fun character, and anything with Keanu Reeves these days as Boom Kaboom, super funny, not particularly overused, comes in later in the movie, but a lot of fun. New character.
That sold me on wanting to see the movie.
Yeah. Keanu Reeves is in
there's
it?
a Canadian stuntman toy named
Duke Kaboom.
It's like Duke Nukem and
I think I just said Boom Kaboom.
That's fine. It's close enough.
Boom to Nuke Doom.
That's the bootleg version of Duke Kaboom. The American bootleg version.
And Chris, you were right. 1995 was the original Toy Story.
Okay.
So I'll shut up.
Thanks for fact checking. I appreciate it.
No, you were right. I disagreed with you and then realized I'm an idiot. So, Chris, you also saw The Lion King. I thought you threw away your tickets. What's this nonsense?
No, I didn't throw away the tickets. I said I wasn't quite as excited to go.
Okay,
we're still going to go.
What's the final? I know critics and audiences are split.
Let me tell you.
Be the man in the middle. Tell us what the truth is.
I saw 2 unnecessary movies this week, guys.
There it is.
Brian and I had a conversation about The Lion King prior to starting the recording, but let me just say that the first animated Lion King is a masterpiece. It's a technical marvel of animation. They did a lot of amazing things that just had not been seen before prior to that movie. And while this movie recaptures certain moments, like I was telling Brian, Mufasa's death, no matter how it's depicted, is always going to elicit feelings within somebody unless you're an effing brick wall. Trying to censor myself.
This is a
here.
live episode of Beers of the Bros.
It
Let's
gets
let
fast
it
and
loose.
loose.
Unless you're a fucking brick wall, you're gonna weep when Mufasa dies.
I thought it was interesting how they changed it up to where Mufasa died by being fucked to death by Scar.
I also thought that was a weird change.
You know, because they said "Be Prepared" wasn't going to be in the film, but when he started singing it,
Oh, God.
poor Donald Glover.
That's a horrific image. Anyway, scenes like that are always going to elicit emotion within a viewer, but overall, this movie is also a technical marvel in that all the animals look real, even though they're all animated. However, it adds nothing to the original film. In fact, I would say that it even takes things away from the original film. Like I was telling Brian, and this is kind of something we mentioned last week when we were talking about Lion King coming out in news, that the downside to creating photorealistic animals is that animals do not have the musculature in their face to smile. So regardless of how the line characters were feeling in any given scene, I felt like I watched an hour and 40 minutes of just lines staring at each other with deadpan faces.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I told Brian that there probably after a half hour of watching the movie, I was like, all right, I'm going to stop looking at their mouths because that's not doing anything for this movie. And I'm going to start watching their eyes to see if maybe their eyes are emoting in the way that like humans would emote, even though they're not humans, right? And I was disappointed. My wife actually really enjoyed this film. But look, like if Disney wanted to make money with The Lion King, they should have just re-released the original Lion
They've
King
already
in theaters.
done that. They did it in 3D and it made $1 billion.
I know they've done it before, but if your goal is to introduce this to a new generation, just release the original. It is so much better than this movie. If you absolutely have to see this movie, I recommend seeing it on the best possible screen you can, solely because it's basically like a National Geographic documentary with weird talking Hamlet lines. But it's unnecessary. If you're on the fence, I would say wait until it's on Disney Plus. This is going to be one of the first releases on Disney Plus when that platform is released. So hold off.
You're not selling it here, Chris. Let's point back to the Marvel movies.
I'm not trying to sell it.
Disney
I'm not
Plus.
selling Disney Plus. The Mandalorian, also directed by Jon Favreau, is coming to Disney Plus as one of the first shows you can watch.
There you go.
The Lion King's just going to be supplementary.
Well, it's spin-off where they pick up and Donald Glover is now king called Roar Boys. With Timon and Pumbaa and Childish Gambino, Roar Boys and Boy Roy. So stupid.
It's going to be a hit for next summer.
Boar Toys and Roar Boys.
Boar Toys and Roar Boys.
It's got a corresponding hip hop album that's going to drop with it as well.
Oh, God. That would have been really funny if I would have gotten it together, you know,
Yeah,
and been able to deliver.
if it landed the first time, that would have been a great joke.
The last thing I'll say about The Lion King. Someone was reading the Rotten Tomatoes, and I want to shoot whoever's in charge of this editorial. The takeaway, by the way, is while it can take pride in its visual achievements, The Lion King is by the numbers retelling that lacks energy and heart that made the original so beloved. Fuck you.
Yeah, it's pretty much what I just said.
Yeah, but they said they had the lion.
Did they have
They made a
fuck you at the end
pride joke
of that
as well.
editorial?
Huh?
At the very end of that editorial,
I
did
think
they
that
say
was
fuck
Christian's
you?
editorial on the editorial.
Yeah, it says fuck you, tomato meter.
I read a review of this that felt like a long excuse to use the term Ouroboros in a critical review, and I also felt like go fuck yourself, man. Like I just don't respect it. If you're gonna try and be like so hoity-toity about it, I'm just gonna go watch this movie and love it just to spite you.
You're not going to love it, I promise you.
Yeah, I probably won't, but I'll probably cry.
I am
So,
interested to hear what you think, because you're seeing it later this week, right?
I am.
Okay.
Yes,
You'll have to come back and tell us what your thoughts were.
next week I will for sure.
Audiences are not roaring to go see The Lion King 2019.
Nailing it.
Christian Katie, BBC News.
You
Signing
will
out.
lose all pride for yourself after watching Jon Favreau's 2019 Lion King.
Critics are saying this movie does not rock.
So good.
It's horrible. I'm sorry. I'm leaving.
I'm trying to think of something involving Rafiki. However, Rafiki, the monkey, doesn't mean it. Rafiki is nothing. So I got audiences are
Zazu.
not.
You're going to feel like a monkey's uncle after viewing Jon Favreau's 2019 The Lion King.
How creepy is the Rafiki scene in the tree and stuff?
Oh, he's actually really toned down in the film. Like he's not
down.
as
Oh, the
crazy.
most emotable.
Yeah, he's very
like
toned
a
down.
human because he looks stupid.
Yeah, he's not as crazy as in the original.
So let's move on to myself. I have been. This is Christian's free game of the week. As per usual, I am playing some free game that we have available on pretty much everywhere. PC and PlayStation, Xbox, Switch now. You can play it on Switch, and that is Warframe. Warframe is kind of like, if you're familiar with Destiny, it's like a looter shooter, but imagine you're more of a space ninja. And it is free to play. But I think that this is, if you're wanting to know how to do free to play games, this is how you do it. I'm going to tell you right now, I was really wanting you guys to try Detroit Become Human. I think I was also talking about Borderlands, and I was like, you know, that might be something you're into if you want to dip your toe. This game is not for either of you. It's hardly
Good
for
to
me.
know.
I've never played a game that's so confusing. There's about if I just could list all of the nomenclature in this game, it would blow your mind. I mean, there is a dictionary you need. In fact, there's a wiki for it that is essential to playing the game. It is absolutely crazy. That being said, the game has so much content for free. You do not have to spend a dime. You can get everything in game by playing it. There are free-to-play mechanics such as when you're building new Warframes, which are essentially suits that change your class that you level up. They take 3 days to make, and they also could take weeks to farm up the materials. And there's about 30 of these suits in the game, and you can either buy them or you can go play the quest to go grab them. If you're a fan of Destiny, and I know Destiny's picking up and a lot of people like it, but you want more of a third-person action game and you don't want to spend a dime and you don't mind a little bit of grinding, it is really, really great once you get past the mechanics. It is one of those, it's like, you know, like a TV show that someone's watching, they're like, you gotta wait till like the third season, like the 5th episode, third season, then it's like great.
I'm never gonna start it.
Yeah, and then you're just like, there's no way I'm sitting through 3 seasons of bull.
They're like 60 episode seasons too.
This is that game. I am 25 hours in probably at this point, maybe a little less. And it finally is really good. Like,
wow.
It was
man.
clunky, and the systems, because this developer was about to go out of business. This is insert here name of developer, but they were a contract house. There's actually a really great documentary on YouTube about them, and I'm blanking on their name right now. But they basically were guns for hire, and they had produced their own couple games, but they were contractors that would be pulled on to help finish games for the last like stretch of them in the crunch time. And so they were contracting out, and they were about to close the studio because their first solo game, A Dark Sector, had failed. And so they had one last shot, and they were like, let's try this free-to-play space. And they released this on PC in 2013. And they've basically been stapling updates and content to it. So it is this weird amalgamation of like, 8 years almost of content they've been putting together. So I think I'm probably in their like 4th year, like at this point, 3rd year. And it's where they finally start doing really cool story stuff. And the game starts to get challenging, which it's severely lacking. It is really, really easy unless you accidentally do a mission you're not supposed to do yet. It's either like impossible or it's easy, right? And it's kind of in that middle ground until you get into where I'm at, which is like the level 20 power range. But it's really cool. You get different, you build everything. You can get pets. The customization of your suit and your frame is amazing. This game, 25 hours in, is like what I wanted from Anthem. With a really good amount of production as well. It's not perfect and by any means, but for a free game, if you've got the time and you want to sit down and you want something Destiny-like that's third person, you're essentially the gameplay is like you're essentially a space ninja. I mean, you either cast spells or you melee a lot or you shoot guns. So it's literally got something for any play style you want. And I think the story is actually getting kind of interesting, which I was not expecting. That was not something I expected.
But you have to play it for 25 hours before that.
No.
happens.
You have to play it for like 500 hours.
Okay.
That's the game never ends. It's one of those things. But because it's been around for 8 years, there's plenty of content to dive into, and it's a game that the more you put in, the more it gives you. And I'm at a point right now where I really understand all the billion systems, because there are a lot of systems and currencies and resources. But once you're familiar with it, the game really feels alive. They work really well with the community. And I won't drone on too much longer, but this is something really special, but it is not for everybody. But if it's for you, it's really for you. And it's a really cool thing to see in the free-to-play space. And I will have, next week, look forward, I have another free-to-play game that I just started, and I can't wait. And this one you guys, I think, can try a little easier. And that's going to be it's called Sky. Children of the Light, I believe. And it's
is it like
it's
Journey?
The makers of Journey, and that's free to play. I'm encouraging the users to download it. I think it's a very, very, very special game.
Is Warframe for you in the same sense that Hellboy is solely for Hellboy comic book nerds?
I don't know. It's hard to describe. If you're into Diablo and you also like Destiny, like players of both of those games,
would like Warframe.
Yes, because it's a big audience. Space Ninja Diablo. Yeah, and it's
a couple of looters shooting around.
Just a bunch of shooters looting and shooting, rootin' tootin'.
Certainly not Nazis, though.
Certainly not Nazis. No, you kill space Nazis essentially. So that is Warframe, available free, and I might talk about it throughout the month because I see I think I'm gonna a lot of these other free games. I definitely dropped off severely after about a week or after I beat them in the case of Detroit Become Human. But in the case of Warframe, I do believe I'll be sticking around with this one for at least a month.
Sweet.
Very cool.
Okay, so I think we'd be remiss, Chris. You're diving in here. Just go ahead and say it.
I'm so sorry, loyal listeners. News is still dropping from Comic-Con, and it turns out that Natalie Portman's returning for Thor: Love and Thunder as the female Thor.
Insane news.
Yep. In the comic
Absolutely
books,
insane
Jane
news.
Foster did pick up Mjolnir and become Thor for quite a long time, actually, several years, and it looks like they are going to adapt that.
Now everybody can pick up the hammer. Now even they're letting women pick up the hammer.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
First you let Cap do it, and then it's a slippery slope.
Welcome to the Old White Man cast.
Old White Man cast.
We are not Nazis. Very cool. So that's what we've been consuming. Let's move on into our weekly poll.
Please don't leave your thoughts on hold. Come on down to a weekly poll. Please don't leave your thoughts on hold. Come on down to a weekly poll.
Hello, and welcome to the weekly Pop-O-Holics cast polls. Hello. Hello. All right, this week we are still doing our Tarantino talks, which means our polls for the next couple of months are full of Tarantino goodness. And last week, loyal listeners, we asked all of you who you preferred as a director. Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan? And let me just say, 59% of you prefer Christopher Nolan, which is a little shocking. I feel like both of these directors have mass appeal. They're both very good at what they do. And it was pretty close. I know we had a bit of a convert at the end by one of the people sitting at this table. Mr. Brian Dupree changed his vote from Christopher Nolan to Quentin Tarantino toward the end. So you made it a little more even. But yeah, thank you to everyone who participated in this week's poll. Gentlemen, how do you feel about these poll results?
So with that intro, this is how I'm feeling right now. I love both of these directors, I gotta say. And I totally understand why. I think Nolan is very much in the pop culture zeitgeist right now in a way that Tarantino, with the infrequency of his releases, can't possibly be. Nolan kickstarted this gritty comic book movie phenomenon. And with that being said, I rewatched Inglourious Basterds and realized that there's a couple of scenes in this movie that are some of my favorite cinematic experiences of all time.
Yeah.
Especially on the first watch. And it's something that I don't think Nolan's ever really given me in terms of characters and individual scenes that are just so gripping and that stick out permanently in my mind. And also, just with that being said, writing women. I think Tarantino can write women in a way that I have not seen Nolan do. I'd like to see him try, maybe at some point, have some female leads, but it seems like he's sticking to what he knows thus far. So I had to switch back to Tarantino because Inglourious Basterds, it was an absolutely incredible rewatch for me. This was only the second time I'd seen it. We'll get into that a little more. But Christian, how do you feel about this?
I feel like we decided to drink Schafferhofer beer, grapefruit beer for this, and I'm so gassy for this podcast. We're having some drinks, guys, and I gotta say, like, it is getting rough. I'm like all of us are just like, our cheeks are blowing up. We're like Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory. Brian, I thought those were excellent points as I roll into some serious conversation. No, like you said, I am so happy for both these directors. Both of them are top directors that I love. I see all of their movies in theaters. They are cinematic movie-going experience. They're doing what makes us come to the synagogue of cinema. So I appreciate both of them. I would say I think the key difference is Nolan movies tend to drop a huge impact, be really exciting to watch, be big spectacles in the theater, and the more you watch a lot of them, kind of the more they start to fall apart and they don't hold up on rewatching, and the logic of them is a little misconstrued, and the exposition is very obvious, and it seems like this isn't really developing character. This is exposition for plot, which is not fun on rewatch. Very great for the first time you watch it because it explains what's happening, but not a lot of density. As we go, we've done a Nolan retrospect in kind of a different format than the way we're doing it this month. But going through Tarantino's movies, it's like every time I rewatch any of these movies, it's like I like it. The most I've liked any of these movies has been the last time I've watched them now.
Yeah.
And I had not felt that way when we revisited Nolan's films. As much as I really love a lot of stuff he does, I would say Tarantino wins in the marathon, Nolan wins in the sprint.
That's well put.
Yeah. Very eloquently put, good sir.
Chris, how did you vote, and what's your thought process?
I initially voted Christopher Nolan on this poll. The reason being is, like I mentioned in the intro here, both of these directors are very good at their particular craft, their particular the way in which they choose to direct. Nolan, in my opinion, directs on more of an epic scope. So Christopher Nolan films tend to be a little broader, while Quentin Tarantino films tend to be a little more intimate, right? They don't focus on like a broader world, but more of like an intimate group of people. So I really think it depends on what you're in the mood for at any given time. If you want something a little more intimate, go with Quentin Tarantino. If you want to be wowed by an epic spectacle, go with Christopher Nolan. After hearing both of you talk about Quentin Tarantino, I almost want to change my vote, but I think I'm right down the middle when it comes to both of these directors.
Yeah, and to Nolan's credit, kind of to my first point, his movies are just much more exciting. And if you drift off for a second, don't worry, someone's gonna explain what's going on. You're gonna see a really cool visual. The cuts are happening fast, and I don't mean this pejoratively.
Are you advocating people falling asleep in the middle of Christopher Nolan films?
Not advocating.
Well, more to say, I was going to sleep watching James Acaster, who's a really great stand-up comedian. His stuff is on Netflix. Grade A. Chris has given the thumbs up. He agrees. And what I noticed though was if I didn't pay attention to the first part of the bit, and I was coming in and out of sleep, and I was halfway through a bit, and I had no idea what's going. I was lost, right? And I feel like Tarantino really commits to 10 to 30 minute scenes. And if you just unfocus yourself for a second and you're out of it, it's almost like that feeling of being out of the joke. And so I think a lot of audiences, if they're just not with the premise, it's gone. Whereas Nolan, once he starts a set piece, it's probably going to be something different or evolve very quickly. And there's more eye candy. And I think that makes it a lot more accessible.
And I think this kind of gets into some of what we've been watching a lot of Charlie Rose interviews with Tarantino, and I think he really trusts his audiences to a large degree to be able to keep up in a way that, because of the way Nolan is expositionally, he lays it out there for you, so you maybe can get a little lost and then come back and find it again, find the plot line.
Tarantino has the courage and the respect of the audience, and I think Nolan's afraid that he's going to lose people. I think he wants to
hear
be
that,
a
Chris?
leader.
Not you, Chris. Chris Nolan.
Chris Nolan.
He's calling you out.
You're
saying
afraid.
You're afraid.
You're afraid of the dark.
I grew up in it. I was born in it.
I was born in it.
The fire rises.
It's
Quickly devolving.
I prefer Tarantino. I would have loved to see that. That would have been awesome. Dark Knight Rises should have been Tarantino. Can you imagine a Batman Tarantino?
I'd watch it.
Yeah.
You can always vote on our weekly polls by visiting our Facebook. That is, search for Pop-O-Holics cast podcast. Podcast. Yeah, 3 pops and a podcast.
Search.
I'm so tired, guys.
Search at Pop-O-Holics on Facebook to find our.
Thanks, Chris.
Facebook page.
Thanks for the save. I really appreciate
welcome.
that. Search for us on Facebook at Pop Podcast at Pop-O-Holics.pop. And you can also follow us on Instagram. Email us at popholicscast@gmail.com if you have any questions, concerns, or comments. Do you like the way that we do this breakdown of an artist, or do you prefer the way we did Chris Nolan's, where we kind of put it into 2 episodes? I would tell you guys I like this format better, but you tell us if we're wrong. We honestly don't know. We don't know anything. Clearly. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking Inglorious Basterds. We'll be right back on
Pop-O-Holics.
10 hot! Eyes forward! My name is Lieutenant Aldo Rain. And I need me 8 soldiers. We're gonna be dropped into France dressed as civilians. We're gonna be doing one thing only. Killing Nazis.
Yes, sir!
Members of the National Socialist Party have conquered Europe through murder, torture, intimidation, and terror. And that's exactly what we're gonna do to them. We will be cruel to the Germans.
That is from the trailer of Inglourious Basterds. 2009, directed by Quentin Tarantino, and it stars Brad Pitt, Melanie Laurent, Christoph Waltz, Eli Roth, Michael Fassbender, Diane Kruger, Daniel Bruhl, Till Schweiger, Gideon Burkhardt,
Yeah.
BJ Novak. So many people. Goes on and on. Lots of people. Paul Rust is in this movie and Sam Levine. We met Sam Levine, so I have touched. Don't
You
look-
touched Sam Levine.
I did touch him. Yeah, we embraced. Me and Sam Levine.
Consensually.
Okay.
But that's first
Mike
degree of
Myers.
separation from Tarantino and Inglorious Basterds, and he's a wonderful guy. We're not talking about Sam Levine. What am I talking about?
So are you? Wait, hold on. I just want to clarify. Are you thinking that at some point in time Sam Levine touched Quentin Tarantino?
Yeah, shook hands.
So you've touched
By
Quentin
proxy,
Tarantino.
I have touched Tarantino. Yeah, absolutely. And
It's a big old touch fest.
I would say that Tarantino
a lot.
has touched all of us. So we're talking Inglorious Basterds, and so excited to get into it. We talked about Jackie Brown last week. This week we're gonna be talking all about Inglorious Basterds. We're gonna talk about our history with it, like we always do. Talk about like kind of what we're bringing into this viewing and how it was received. We're gonna be talking about kind of the premise of it, the alternate history, the kind of fairy tale story of fictitious story in one of the most important events, most important wars that our world has faced in the last 200 years, right? We're going to talk about the kind of weird blurred lines of morality and brutality in the film, talk about our overall thoughts and some of our favorite parts, and then we'll compare it to his other work and kind of lead into a discussion about what we expect from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So let's start. Chris, if it's okay, let's start with you, man.
Yeah,
Tell us your
sounds
history
good to
with
me.
this film and kind of what come into it. This viewing did for you. Maybe if I just stutter even more.
Well, Christian, let me just say, I did not see this movie in theaters. I ended up seeing this movie on Blu-ray once it was released, and right off the bat, this was my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie. So I hold this film in high regards. Every single time I watch it, it gets better and better. This viewing in particular, I noticed that this movie kind of plays like a comic book, which is really interesting. Like I could absolutely 100% see Inglourious Basterds being a graphic novel and doing really, really well. But this movie's great, and we're going to dive into it deeper. Brian,
Deep divers.
deep diving.
That's what we do.
Brian, what's your history with Inglorious Basterds?
So I also did not see this one in theaters. I actually saw this for the first time at a free screening that they did in college. So I was lucky enough to not have to pay to see this movie. I want to say it was probably around 2011, 2012 that I saw this one. And yeah, loyal listeners of the pod may know I am a very squeamish movie watcher, and I had seen Kill Bill before this, and even the Kill Bill movies, with the level of violence there, it is cartoony enough for me to be able to kind of separate myself from it. Not so much in this movie at all. This movie, I forgot how just gory it was, and I should have known. It has scalping, open scalping, and yeah, so that's something that I immediately became aware of having rewatched it here. But the first time, yeah, it had a couple of scenes. This movie starts off with one of the most gripping scenes of any movie that I've ever seen. And that scene itself is pretty much what sold me on changing my vote, because I felt like it was so viscerally exciting. And even having known the second time, coming back to it, what was going to happen, the way it plays out is just so good. And you read into the language a little more. You see the characters' motivations, the acting. Christoph Waltz is absolutely incredible in this movie.
Amazing.
And the writing together with his acting, it's just unbelievable. And like you were saying, to the comic book nature of it, I think this is where he's at his best in terms of these vignettes. It's, I think, 5 or 6 approximately 25-minute short films, essentially. And any of these things could stand alone, in my opinion, and be legitimate short films. I think they have enough character context for the most part to fully understand what's going on with the characters. The writing is so strong, and obviously a bunch of huge names, recognizable faces. But yeah, I love this movie. It's hilarious, and the levity of it adds even more to the seriousness of it. And I don't want to get into specifics right now. I'm just going to stop babbling. Christian?
So this is the first Tarantino film that I had seen in theaters. This was the year that I graduated from high school. Just to carbon date me. And this was such a really important experience. The first time and since then I've seen every Tarantino film in the theaters. So it's, hugely important in that regard. Just a very special experience. Besides that, the film definitely gripped me upon the first watching, and I remember being very high on the film, going out of it and singing its praises, and just I think it's so crazy, and we will be spoiling the movie going forward. Just as a retrospective, go watch it, go see it. So just your little spoiler alert. But the fact that Hitler gets shot in the face, I remember not expecting that. I don't know why I wasn't expecting it, but I guess maybe it's just because of 18 years of world history.
Yeah,
and
you
it's just
expected it to be more true to life.
Yeah, because the film is somehow cartoonishly violent, elevated and heightened in its reality, and yet you didn't think that it was going to break and divulge from historical fact for whatever reason. All these characters are made up and everything, and I'd never heard of any of the characters because they're all made up, but it had no grounding other than it takes place in Nazi-occupied France. And so that was really jarring, and to see that was kind of probably the first time I'd been introduced to kind of an historical, very accurate to the time, and the music and the feeling and the vibe, and especially the language. I remember being blown away by the fact that all the different language made me appreciate how much of a difference that makes to have native speakers or people that are from other language countries that know the language, and that being different and talking about accents and all that. So that being really incredible, and just really fitting into this really cohesive story, and then diverting so much and being so ridiculous, really played with my expectations of what you could do, what kind of stories you could tell. Coming to it this time, it's so good. It gets better every time. I've seen this movie probably 4 or 5 times now, and more than ever after watching it, I wanted to immediately, like today, I rewatched it last night, and today I've just been thinking about it, and I've been rewatching scenes. And I would totally be down to just rewatch this movie again after we're done recording. It's that good. And I think it really, like I had said earlier when we were comparing Tarantino and Nolan, it just really values rewatchability, because you get so much of the characters' motivations and arcs, and kind of the different levels of nuance in the characters' interactions as it keeps going. And it's really a beautiful thing. It's also like a really hard movie to watch. And we'll talk about that when we get into the morality and brutality. I think there's a lot of things that really challenge why I like movies. So let's talk about Tarantino's take on the alternate history, and kind of this movie's commentary on cinema and history and all that stuff. What stood out, Brian? We'll start with you. What really stood out upon this rewatch in its like capturing of Nazi occupied France, what they played with, and kind of that whole thing.
Well, just to touch on your point about language, this movie is one of the few movies that deals with a lot of non-English language, and it narratively justifies the switch to English when it does happen. And the fact that can play into the gripping nature of the scenes is just absolutely brilliant filmmaking. And it's from the get-go. And obviously people are speaking German and Italian and other languages throughout the rest of the movie, and there are subtitles sometimes. There's, in an interesting way, not subtitles a lot of times when some of the German soldiers are speaking, which I thought was very good in the sense
purposeful.
Of definitely purposeful in the sense of we don't know what these guys are really saying to each other. It kind of adds to that fear factor of this unknown, hateful force. But in terms of the alternate history, this movie just has throughout its entirety this feeling of and this is Tarantino, justified violence. You know, you have all these characters who are so in themselves problematic. They love what they're doing. They love this violence, but because you know the actual history of the people, that some of the characters are real in this. You know, we do have Hitler and the head of the Third Reich are actual characters in this movie, and even the soldiers beneath them, because of their complicit nature in this history. We don't feel bad for these people in the least, even when they're standing up for their country and trying to justify their actions. We can get behind this violence. We know how atrocious it is. This is, you know, people talk about it as a cop-out, but you bring this up in an argument, and this is our real conception of evil in our society, especially from a generation that never had to go to war. I think this is the thing you point to as the most, or some of the most, if not the most atrocious things that can happen on Earth. So this very much just feels like a power fantasy to try and get back some level of power from this atrocious situation, even though we know we won this war. As much as you can win a conflict like this, the Nazis were defeated. Hitler did kill himself. And I think at its core, this is just a way to delve into history, delve into the history of film, propaganda, how it can be used for positive and negative, and empower the audience to, you know, reclaim something that is a very bad spot on human history.
As you said, Brian, this is definitely Quentin Tarantino's attempt to reclaim some of that power and fight back against the Nazi regime. By creating this alternate history, it makes it feels like justice has been served, right? Like the American people and some French civilians were responsible for the death of Hitler instead of him kind of taking his own life, which in some way doesn't seem as impactful, right? Like it kind of seems like a loss, right? Just the fact that most of this, well, not most of the movie, but a very important part of this movie takes place in a cinema, I think illustrates how much Quentin Tarantino loves and respects the cinema, just writing it into this film. But yeah, Christian,
there's a lot of layers going on here with this film, and that's what I think the rewatchability really plays into. Like there was like 6 different things I was paying attention to that I really didn't give that much thought to the meaning behind it. But I was also conflicted because there is Brian, you mentioned that Tarantino, that the Germans are mostly painted as like bad, and really the only caricature of a German is Hitler. Kind of appropriately so. Hitler is a silly cartoon of like, he's the most mustache twirling, the tiny little mustache that he has. I mean, everything for him is played as a joke. He's a joke.
He's wearing a cape with a swastika on it in one scene.
He's literally like a goblin, right? There's even a shot where they're doing a portrait of him, and he's all like hunched over and gross, and then like the thing is him being very regal. Right, and then when he's watching the final film, the Nation's Pride, and he's just cackling, you just are like, ugh, gross. But I really would argue that every German you talk to, a couple of key ones especially, some of our leads, our main German characters, are really relatable. And there's gross things about them, right? But I found myself more compassionate about them as characters, not about Nazi Germany and the Nazi message. Obviously, that is very gross and awful and terrible. But I really, this time through, I was really paying attention to how Tarantino wanted to have, the bastards are all like these Nazi killing motherfuckers.
Right.
We're going to scalp them, right? And they're literally scalping them, and then action, high violence, and it's just like, kill the Nazis. But then you have, what's his name? Zoller?
Yeah, Frederick Zola.
And I think he's definitely not a perfect character. It's not like he's a perfect analogy, but he was literally made as a mirror image to the American soldier who went through like a similar thing and had a movie made about him. And he does have this actual genuine interest in Melanie Laurent's character, Johanna Dreyfus, then Emmanuel Mimieux. He's a gentleman to her, right? And we see his true colors later, but I do think the movie is constantly, I don't think he wouldn't want us to care if he wasn't showing, when I think back to, Daniel Bruhl's character's Frederick Zoller watching his own film and shrieking as he's watching him kill soldiers. And he has this kind of regrettable, like, this is kind of what I'm known for. And this whole movie's just about me killing. And I took those lives. And you really see in his like face and reactions that he is dealing with the fact that he's famous for murdering people.
Right. It's difficult for him to watch.
And it's bothering him. And they make up, Tarantino makes a point to cut to that several times, right? And the overwhelming brutality of it all. And yet he's still kind of a creep at the end, right? But it doesn't paint him as a simply flat character. And even Christoph Waltz's character is a very complex character, right? So, but yet the action's so cartoonish, and it's weird how they want to, how Tarantino wants to rewrite history and kind of explore this power fantasy, but he's still taking a really big gamble of making one of the most interesting characters is a Nazi, like in the film. He's like one of the star-stealing performances. And so, do you guys find an issue with that? Because I found it really hard as he humanized the Nazis to that final scene when they're trapped in the fiery theater and they're just raining bullets and there's women dying. Like there's women dying and you know, all these other Germans, and you got to imagine some of them are real assholes. They're Nazis, right? But I really was struck by the juxtaposition between the humanity the film paints throughout, you know, the propaganda machine and the idea of Nazis, but really it's made up of individuals who are just like Americans or anything, just people serving their country. And, you know, even Christoph Waltz's character was a detective. I think that's his backstory, right? He's like, I do this, you know, and I'm trying to, you know, for my country or whatever. I know I'm rambling on again, but what do you guys feel about how it takes? Did you guys sense that at all, or did you kind of like, no, not too bad?
Are you asking if we feel any type of regret or remorse for the death of the German people in this film?
Yes.
No, I do not. The reason being is like, obviously we have knowledge of what took place during World War II. So while we do get some glimpses of the humanity behind the German people in the film, I feel, and this, I don't know if this paints me as some type of monster or something, but I feel no remorse for the death of those specific people in this movie. During the first scene with Christoph Waltz, Hans Landa, and Pierre Lapidite, right? That's his name? Yeah, Lapidite. That gives you a glimpse into what like Nazi occupation was like during that time, putting people in situations where they had to choose between their families and the lives of their neighbors. I was watching it with a friend, and we actually paused the movie and had a brief conversation about like what that must have been like and what we would have done in those particular instances. And for the world to be put in a place where that's something that's taking place is unacceptable. So personally, I feel zero remorse for these particular people. Honestly, Nazi Germany occurred because the German people were apathetic to what was going on.
Yeah.
Like, you paint it as patriotism and just doing what was right for their country. But honestly, it was just apathy. Like, no one wanted to stand up and say that what we are doing as a people is wrong. And that's why you have great characters like Hugo Stiglitz in this film, who is a Nazi soldier that does decide to stand up and say what this party is doing is wrong. And then he makes a 180 and starts killing Nazis himself. So I don't have any remorse. Brian, what do you feel?
So I think something that this movie does really well is that it does provide some level of humanity to these characters. Chris and I were talking before we were recording how Christoph Waltz's character is ridiculously charming.
Yeah.
Even though we know he's an atrocious person, he's manipulative, and he's done all of these things. And something that's really interesting about this movie is that there's no mention of concentration camps in this movie. It's
right.
almost implicit within the whole thing, what's happening with the Jewish people. We get that scene at the beginning, a couple of references here and there throughout the movie, but we really don't see a lot of the most atrocious acts that the Third Reich has been committing. So,
the Holocaust is the Uncle Ben of
the unspoken known
in terms of
character.
The Tom Holland Spider-Man?
Yeah, in terms of like it's something we all know. Sorry, I just got Spider-Man on the brain. I know I made a weird comparison between the Holocaust and Uncle Ben. But it is this idea that Tarantino, we were talking about, Tarantino respects his audience enough that he's like, you know
what's going on.
You know why they're mad.
Yeah.
Right.
You
of
know why
course.
Spider-Man's whipping around New York City? Because of the Holocaust.
Exactly. Pop-O-Holics. Thanks for listening.
Making the Rio connections.
Sorry to cut you off, Brian.
No, you're fine. But yeah, I think so. I think in today's day and age, being so far removed from this tragedy that none of we're all around 30 years old. We can't really put ourselves in the mindset of what the world was going through at this time, and it's become this kind of not meaningless talking point, because obviously there's intrinsic meaning in it, but something that's very difficult to relate to humans actually being able to do this. And I think something the movie does really well is provide humanity it gives a face to evil action in a way where it's like you could see these people being your neighbors and acting this way. And the movie highlights the propaganda machine and how people started going to the theaters much more so with Joseph Goebbels.
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Goebbels.
I really have no idea how to pronounce this name, but the propaganda minister was extremely effective at showing the people what they wanted, keeping the national pride up, and the people supporting the actions. Meanwhile, something like Dachau, this was something like 10 miles outside of a major city, and people were largely unaware of the atrocities that were happening at, concentration camps and death camps, the working camps as well as the gas chamber camps. And even to the point where the UN would come in and they would present they would have all the healthiest looking inmates presented there, and some people were like, some of these Jews are better off here than they would have been outside, So the German state did an incredible job of hiding the most egregious, atrocious actions. And I think it speaks to that, how you can see these people who are going along with their government, thinking they can do it for the right reasons. But at the end of the day, most of these characters have no level of sympathy once we see their true colors for who they really are.
It sounds like that the German people just want to make Germany great again.
Wow.
Let's not. Oh no.
I think it's the only political point I'm going to make is that you have kind of this idea of in America of a socialist movement on the far left and a nationalist movement, and the Nazi Party is the nationalist socialist movement, right? It's this kind of utopia.
Just like the Democratic Republic of China, right? It's like they use names that aren't representative of the movement.
But it's this collective. Well, I think what made it popular was it was a very populist ideology mixed with nationalism, right? And I think if I would be a centrist here, I think both are in their extremes can be dangerous forms of thought, like to their natural conclusions in their extremes, as we've seen in history over and over again, right? Look up Russia, guys, please, and Nazi Germany. So anyway, and we got real Nazis on the street, and we got real socialists running for president. So yeah, cats living with dogs. What's happening? I'm making no friends. This is what happens when you're a centrist. You piss off everybody. So to that point though, I think you're hitting on something really smart. Between the two extremes that you guys have, is that I do find that Tarantino very smartly, as you go up the chain of the people that are really responsible, such as Mr. Goebbels and Hitler, especially all the Nazi leadership, they're the most despicable people. And the people below them are people that are genuinely other people you'd find on the other side that are
still witnessing atrocity in their streets, seeing communities torn apart. Like the first scene definitely shows how, and this is just France, not even within Germany itself, this whole family is completely terrified by just these people coming to visit their house because they know what they represent, Yeah. So just that in itself shows that the people knew that this was happening, even if they didn't see everything in front of them. They saw enough to have an idea.
And I think the difference is that where there is, I still have sympathy, but yet I think the justification and the comeuppance that our characters get is that even the characters that we can sympathize with, for instance, Frederick Zoller's, David Bruhl's character, Daniel Bruhl's character, he kind of wants normalcy, right? But yet he keeps having to face the terrors, and he's conflicted about it, yet he does nothing. I think one thing I really noticed was Christoph Waltz's character doesn't actually kill anybody but a German in the film. He is responsible. He's kind of he's like almost the bigger problem of something like Nazi Germany, which is that he's a man just doing his job.
Right.
And he kind of keeps his hands clean until the very end when he kills a German herself who's actually trying to save the country, and he tries to use it to his advantage. to get out of the situation, you know. And I thought that was, and again, we don't see any of the Germans killing any Jews of the characters that were like, you know, we don't see any of that. We are seeing the revenge plot, you know, we're seeing that. So it's really weird that Tarantino is so brave enough to go like, you know why they're pissed, and we don't need to show any of that. In fact, we're going to kind of play the opposite, but still all these characters are flawed. And I think that is just a really interesting and bold take, and plays into kind of the brutality of it. This movie's super brutal.
It's a continuation of what he does in all of his other films, which is show these groups of flawed individuals. That's a pretty consistent thing he attempts to do in cinema.
Yeah, but I don't think. Would you say, if we're talking about the characterization, that our heroes have as much depth as the Germans? Like, I feel like all the heroes of the story are one note and don't change and develop. Yet all the Germans go through movements. You know, they're the characters that change. They're who the, I don't know. I mean, I would.
It's
say,
almost as if the Inglorious Basterds are the antagonists.
A little bit, but it's just really strange, and I can see why some people were off put by some of the stuff in this movie. Just knowing how kind of reversal that is. I would say the one hero character that we have, Melanie Laurent's character, Miss Dreyfus, you know, she's kind of our main protagonist throughout, that kind of has this savior moment, and she chains with retribution, but it is still something driven by retaliation and revenge. So we get a little bit of that, but really I think the real character pieces are some of the Germans.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And not to totally derail here, but I think I want to touch on something you said about Hans Landa, Christoph Waltz's character, and how he is very much an opportunist, and he's completely aware of what's happening to these Jewish people that he's finding.
Definitely.
There's no doubt.
Well,
in
he's
any of our
there when
minds.
they shoot them in the floor.
Well,
You know, he witnesses
right, exactly.
it
So
firsthand.
we see it, and right, of course, yeah, he probably has personally killed, and I think he does admit to having killed many Jewish people, and then he inevitably makes a deal with the OSS, which is the precursor to the CIA, and I thought it was kind of interesting to show him as the one who reached out to them when, you know, historically after the war ended, the OSS did reach out and take a lot of people who were working under the Third Reich in terms of scientists and others in Operation Paperclip, and brought them over. Werner von Braun, who was a huge figure in developing NASA and getting us to the moon, to be completely honest, was a Nazi. You know, he worked under them, and it's like, what type of person is this? He could have easily been a character in this movie, you know?
Yeah.
So that was kind of an interesting take on that. And I was happy to see that, you know, Tarantino, obviously aware of this fact, he has Brad Pitt's character like, you're not going to hide in plain sight in our society. We know exactly who you are, so we'll mark you permanently, you know. And I think that's kind of him, you know, getting back a little bit from this, what could be easily perceived as a slight to them not having to stand trial in Nuremberg, you know.
Agreed.
Just to summate kind of that conversation, I think that from rewatching it, it is crazy how the first watch is this, for me, personal experience, this rush of brutal revenge thriller that with really tense scenes that we're going to get into, and then as you just kind of learn it more, it really is way more complex than that. Like, on the surface, you can enjoy it as that thriller, but I think looking a little bit deeper, it's very strange how he and I think in a really good way, how he humanizes so many of our villains, and also has caricatures and plays into the comedy and the brutality of it, and the tragedy and the drama and the, you know, twists and turns. And you know, one last thing too is I think every German character except for Hans, who's kind of forever marked, you know, with his Nazism and the crimes he did, even though he kind of made out like a bandit with all this, you know, every German character dies, aside from him. Every main character that is German.
Yeah.
And I didn't reflect on kind of all that. Even the good Germans, you know, we've got Stiegel or
Stiglitz. Hugo Stiglitz.
Hugo Stiglitz dies. Fassbender, who's betraying a German officer, the other German bastard, German American, The actress gets strangled. Hitler, of course. Goebbels.
That's true.
Mexican standoff. Is this a Mexican standoff? I don't have a gun, so is it a true Mexican standoff?
That leads into our conversation about some of our favorite scenes. If you were to pick, you got to give top scene this watch through. Who do you give the crown jewel to? What steals the show? Because this film is just a collection of incredible, award-winning scenes, just top of Tarantino's game. But if you had to give it to one, what won you over this watch through?
You know, it's crazy because it's the opening scene, but that first scene with Christoph Waltz and Pierre Lapidite, the character, the level of tension that Tarantino is able to build in that scene. Brian mentioned earlier about our conversation before recording about how Christoph Waltz is so charming and calming in that scene, and yet still maintains this sense of terror. You're afraid of him. And there are a couple moments within that scene where he even gets a little excited, and that calming demeanor kind of disappears briefly. But the way that scene is framed and the build up to him discovering the Jews in the floorboards, I just think everything about that scene is perfect. Last week, Christian, you said that you thought that the opening conversation in Jackie Brown is Quentin Tarantino's best opening dialogue, and I would say that this is his best opening dialogue in all of his movies.
Yeah, it's hard to not retract that statement. Afterwards, it's like, oh yeah, wait, no, this is so good. Yeah, and just that it goes from it's lightly tensed scene, and so there's definitely like German soldiers, French, interrogating this guy and his family. But Christoph Waltz is very polite, overly polite, kind of eerily polite as you go.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of his shtick, right? And then slowly as they're talking, the camera slowly drifts and you see under the floorboards, and immediately the stakes go through the roof.
Yeah. I would like to add one more thing before we move on. I love the way in which he depicts these like micro power plays in the scene where Pierre Lapidite asks if it's okay if he pulls out his pipe to smoke, and you can see that it's this like little tiny corncob pipe. And then maybe 5 minutes later, Hans Landa asks if he minds if he pulls out his pipe, and it's like 5 times the size of Lapidite's pipe. And it's just things like that where Landa knows that by doing these little tiny micro actions, he's asserting himself as the powerful person in the room. As
he's just being nothing but
polite,
seemingly sincere and over polite, right? Mm-hmm. I'm very complimentary. Yeah,
it's wonderful.
That's the
and horrifying.
Yeah, and it kind of plays into kind of that every one of these German characters gets a show of brutality. Like towards the end, when his moment is when he strangles the German actress, right? It's in all that politeness and all that stuff and all that. It's all gone
out the window.
Out the window, indeed. Why did he close the window? By the way, in the scene, the Frenchman who owns the house where he's hiding the Jews. He goes, close the window.
I think it's just so their conversation doesn't drift outside.
Maybe.
But I was telling Brian that I think that at least if he could replicate elements of his performance in this movie, Christoph Waltz would be an excellent Joker in a future Batman film.
Yeah, and apparently this film hinged on. I'll link to it in the show notes. It's a really great video with Tarantino and kind of some of the major players in the production. He didn't think that this movie could get made because he wrote that character to speak all those languages and to act very big. And he's like, there's no one on earth that acts at this performance and can speak all these languages. And then he met Christoph Waltz, and as soon as he left, he like high-fived his producer. It was like, oh my god, we can make this movie. It was like Christoph Waltz, no surprise if you've seen the movie, was like the golden goose of being able to accomplish this. You know, he speaks French, German, a little Italian, and English. So
it's amazing.
Unreal.
4 languages.
Brian, give us your favorite scene, man.
So, I mean, it's hard to argue with that intro scene. The one other one that always stuck with me, and I will say this is the type of movie where it's got so much and so many great scenes that every time I come back to it, I remember a lot more as I'm going along. But I've got to point to the bar scene, the meetup with the actress character Bridget von Hammersmark, who is playing a double agent with British intelligence, and she has them meet up at a bar with the Bastards, and she thinks well, they think that it's just going to be an easy meetup, although they're immediately, which I think is a pretty hilarious bit when they're like, you never plan to meet up underground, you know, in the basement is a terrible place to fight. And that whole scene, how it starts with levity and they're kind of concerned, they've never met this woman, going down, and I think it matches comedy and tension so well. Even it's a completely different scene than the first one because there's not really that much comedy in the first scene. But at this point in the movie, we know the bastards, we know their characters, and they have a good repertoire. They work well together, and they get there immediately. They see all of these drunk German soldiers who are out celebrating, and the tension immediately starts rising, even though there's a lot of funny stuff happening. So I think this scene, and it leads to Michael Fassbender's very short-lived experience in this movie, but that's got to be up there for me, and it's a scene that I can never forget. That scene in the first scene will always stick with me, and it gets down to a classic standoff with Tarantino where he loves these Mexican standoffs, and he seems like he's almost making fun of himself during this scene, which I had just brought up about defining what a Mexican standoff is. But this scene, it gets into language and accents and even mannerisms, and how someone who is actually trained in these things can immediately call out someone who is a novice or not a professional at speaking a language. And I think it shows what true intelligence and spycraft is in a way that a lot of movies, even something like James Bond, it seems very surface level compared to a scene like this where we get so much.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm sure you guys have a lot to say about this scene.
It seems like, no, absolutely. And it seems like the scene had to have taken him a year to write. Like, because it's so...
It's so nuanced.
It really feels there's so many things at play, and again, that rewatchability of really understanding where every character's motivation, where they're coming from, and all the twists and turns, and where you see things go wrong, and all that stuff, and then just it doesn't feel it's like a 20-minute long scene, and
yeah, it's at least 15, 20. Yeah.
Would you edit out any part of it? Would you add anything? Like seriously, it's damn near perfect, and I think it just keeps getting better and better. Chris. Oh, I thought you wanted to say something.
No. I mean, I completely 100% agree with everything that you just said.
100%? Are you sure not 95%?
99.99998%.
There was a pause there that was a little off.
But, yeah, the first scene, this scene, they're both... We said that Reservoir Dogs was a perfect movie. This is like a collection of Reservoir Dogs. Like all the different vignettes within this film, they're written so perfectly and cut so well, and even the last line of the movie with Brad Pitt saying, "I do believe that this is my masterpiece." Quentin Tarantino definitely thinks that this is the best thing he's ever made, 100%. Like it's a great.
It's hard to argue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was watching it. I had my opinions, and I was like, I had some front runners. But then I watched this movie again and setting the bar for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood very, very high. One of my favorite takeaways from you guys mentioned probably the two most famous scenes from this movie. Those are great. I am going to say that the one that tickled me endlessly and that I have been repeating to everybody's annoyance today is the scene in which Mr. Hans interrogates some of the bastards as they're posing as Italian cameramen.
Oh God, yeah.
This is going to be part. Obviously, I believe only like 20 to 35% of this movie is actually in English. So this film is one of the ones that is in. This part is in half German, half Italian. But just close your eyes, and you don't need to speak the language to just get the humor. You'll understand it.
Grazie.
Gorlomi? Lo pronuncio correttamente?
Sì, corretto.
Gorlomi? Per cortesia, me lo ripeti ancora.
Gorlami.
Mi scusi, con me?
Gorlami.
Ancora una volta.
Gorlami.
E come si chiama lei?
Antonio Margareti.
Ancora?
Margareti.
Un'altra volta, ma adesso vorrei proprio sentire la musica delle parole.
Margareti.
Margheriti. E lei?
Dominic De Coco.
Come? Dominic de Coco. Bravo. Bravo.
Ich glaube, meine Kamerafreunde müssen ihre Plätze finden.
So, like, that is again what I love about the scene. You could play it without subtitles, and you'll just get it, like, because they're clearly out of place.
And Dominic de Coco. I love that Londa kind of congratulates him on getting the inflection, the Italian inflection,
Right, it's like, you sold
perfectly
it.
on the first try. He's like, "Oh, bravo! Like you did a great job selling your
performance,
character
yeah.
compared to these other two schmucks that clearly do not speak Italian." And the funny thing about that is, the bastard who is playing Dominic de Coco is the one who apparently speaks no Italian at all. So he was third in line to be chosen
like I
for
said,
this
third
mission.
best.
Third best.
God, this is gonna lead into a conversation. I want to talk about Brad Pitt in this movie. I want to talk. I've listened to a couple of podcasts and read some stuff, and I think he's a deal breaker for some people in some regards, which blows my mind because
Interesting,
this is one of my favorite roles from him. What do you guys think? What's your verdict on Brad Pitt and his insane accent and all of his mannerisms and his apparently coke habit throughout the entire film? What do we think?
I don't have any problem with it. I think like for the character of Aldo Rain, what else would a Nazi hunter be like during World War II? Like an American Nazi hunter. Like what are some people's problems with this particular
That he's
role?
too silly. That his accent is not good. Like it's not. It's like too overbearing, and that his monologue's going on a bit long. None of which I'm agreeing with.
No, yeah, I don't agree with any of that either, and I think that's because, like I said earlier, upon this watching, when I was looking over the entire film and the type of characters that are in it and the performances that they're giving, it's like a cartoon or a graphic novel or a comic book. Like there are fantastic elements in this film that make it acceptable for characters to behave in the way in which they're behaving. Like Donnie the Jew Bear, like, or the Bear Jew, Donnie the Bear Jew, like that's a ridiculous character. You would see that character in like a Mark Millar comic.
And
like,
with how ridiculous it is, Hitler takes offense like just a child, and he's like, I officially sanctioned to never use that title ever
Right.
again throughout the ranks, you know?
The dissemination of information definitely is like super. Obviously, like we've talked about, the propaganda machine.
Yeah, but I think all the performances like perfectly fit within the context of the fantasy that Tarantino's trying to create here.
Right. And for his character, which the Apache is just a ridiculous name, like, you know,
Yeah.
American Indian, like the most southern guy imaginable, being the Apache is just hilarious. And I guess the scalping probably gets into that. I'm not sure if the Apache were the actual ones who did scalping, but everything is very cut and dry for Brad Pitt's character. And with his position, like you said, Chris, how else would a Nazi hunter be? He's very aware that these people are atrocious, and he's got one job to do, you know, and he does it. So it is a caricature, but as you've said, it's like, I think the real character work is happening with the villains, which Tarantino, you know, he likes to make us sympathize with these atrocious characters, for better or for worse.
Yeah, it's like this movie. I think people have the problem because there are moments like that beginning scene where I think actually Christoph Waltz's character, as big as he is, gets bigger later and is more hammier later, and it's pretty hammy in that first scene. But overall, that film that scene is steadily tense, and I think maybe some people are put off by the fact that there is great, to use an audio analogy, this film has insane dynamic range of like tension, fear, comedy, and subtle nuanced performances and over the top ridiculous. And frequently Brad Pitt character is only a silly cartoon character throughout the whole thing. Which is, you know, I can see why if you're really digging this more serious aspects of the film, when it gets over the top, maybe it's a little much, especially with how, you know, violent the film could be. But he's just so fun, and I would say his accent is probably a little shaky, but it plays into the caricature of an Appalachian man, right? The Apache that he is. It definitely forgivable, and he just sells it with his body work in this every time. It's like he's speaking more, like he says funny things in a funny way, and he's over the top, but really it's like he's dancing, almost. The way his body moves every beat that he's going through something. If you just watch it, it is perfectly choreographed, and it feels like he's fully in sync with the character that he is, and in a way that I think Christoph Waltz kind of combats that on his end as well.
And even with the scene you played, it is hilarious, but you start to see the hatred just come over Pitt's face throughout this scene, and he is just getting so angry. And even if he takes you out of it, I don't think you can avoid the tension that's building in that scene when Waltz just starts cracking up when she gives him the excuse of having climbed a mountain. Like, really? Like,
he's playing Hans Landa's playing them the entire time.
Exactly.
Like from the very beginning,
But
he knows
Pitt's aware of
exactly
it.
what's
If you
going
watch
on.
Pitt the entire time,
that's why he's
got
getting
his,
so pissed
yeah.
off, right?
Yeah, he's like clenching his teeth, and he's
Right.
like, okay, I know we've been found.
He would
And
rather
yet-
just shoot this guy in the middle of the crowd
That's
than
it.
continue the facade, basically.
Well, and he's also, I think he's frustrated because he's wondering why he hasn't made his move yet. Because he knows, he can see how ranked he is.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, okay, we're not being taken away right now.
The jig is up. What's
What
going
is
on?
this?
Yeah.
What is this? Now this is worse because I don't know. Like, if someone handcuffs me, throws a bag over my head, I know where I stand. This is this is frustrating, and he's toying with us. What is this power play? You know?
Shoes on the other foot. Yeah, I was just thinking that.
But his character is just, obviously so fun, and I would say that was my fake favorite scene, just because it stuck with me, and I have been
It's
saying
so memorable,
I have
yeah.
been saying
is.
Gorlami the entire.
Dominic De Coco.
The hand gestures.
A lot of people walked away from the film. I remember when I saw it going like "Buongiorno" because that's like the first time he speaks it. He's like, I know a little Italian, when he's like Italian to it. So
I'm not sure if this is true, but a friend told me that apparently that was kind of unscripted for him to do continue the accent and just be that hammy with it.
Yeah.
And Tarantino's just like, we can't beat that. Just go with it.
Here's the thing: it's perfect. So yeah,
That's a good Tarantino.
The entire day, it's Gorlami. I can't get it out of my head. But I think one of my real favorite scenes is the Jew bear. When they find that bear in the woods with a yarmulke, they're like, "There's
There's that Jew bear.
It's the yodelers who are like, "Oh, that's the Jew bear! Get him!" Yeah, and it was very, very disturbing. Just kidding. This is not.
I was trying to follow. I was like, did I miss this scene?
No, the bear Jew when Lieutenant Aldo Rain is interrogating the German soldier, and again
Oh, yeah.
listen, I'm not a Nazi sympathizer. I want to put that out there because I feel like I've come on the side of the Germans. Like, as far as me being able to feel for their characters and their place in their society, they're still awful. And Tarantino does a good job of giving them all moments of like, oh no, they're pieces of shit. Like throughout the entire film, even the most sympathetic characters are like, oh no, they're actually a big piece of shit. And their true character is terrible, right? But they are humans nonetheless. Is the one Nazi soldier who's like, I'm gonna die for my country, and Brad Pitt just making like, good, that's fantastic, like, and being like, I wanted you to say that.
This is the closest thing to movies
Yeah,
that we
I
get.
love it. Yeah. You know what? I'm really glad that you said that because watching Donnie work is really the closest thing we get to going to the movies.
And because Tarantino knows he's written in a character, it's almost like Aldo Rain has access to the script. Like Aldo, like Tarantino put in a character who's scared shitless the entire time. And if you just watch him, you're like, and Aldo Rain, then you go, you know what? Aldo Rain is so smart. He looks at the guy squealing and goes, oh, he's going to tell us everything. Let's have some fun, right? He already knows he's like, he could have just asked the guy who was trembling, but then he saw the proud German. He goes, time for justice. Like, this is time for retribution right here. Like, I'm going to make you die for your country in the most pathetic way possible. And then that's followed by Eli Roth doing I think the most hammy over the top thing that doesn't work is Eli Roth screaming baseball shit.
Yeah, yeah.
He's like, what is it? Teddy, who's he shouting out? Some baseball player. And he's like, right out of the park ball game. It's good. And I'm like, listen, I don't know a lot about baseball. I don't think people even in the 40s said stuff like, ball game, out of the hard, home run, running good.
You know, now that you say that you don't think people in the 40s would say stuff like that, this brings me back to the Mexican standoff scene. Would a German soldier in like the 1940s know what a Mexican standoff is?
Everyone was very aware of American cinema it seemed like surprisingly.
And international cinema.
International cinema in general, sure. So I think that is something that is kind of intrinsic to the plot. But yeah, it does seem a little bit silly that
I would say that's
everyone know what that is.
A lot of times there's a lot of pop culture references in Tarantino films, and those are the moments when you're like, oh yeah, Tarantino wrote this. And I would say for Tarantino's quote unquote masterpiece that is Inglourious Basterds, that is the only time in this movie that line about Mexican standoff and them debating it is the only time in this movie where it's like, oh yeah, Tarantino wrote. Like, there's parts that you're like, oh, Tarantino's awesome. Clearly, he's writing at his top of his game, but it never feels cheap to that extent. And that one is a good line. It's a fun line. And I think it's that one thing he gets in where it's like, you know what, the character really wouldn't say this, but I need him to say this because
And just to get into Tarantino, I always got to shout out how he shows you behind the scenes, like how Shoshana's character, who, did you guys think it was strange that Christoph Waltz let her survive in the first scene? I was like, did he just not have a good shot? Was it almost like a plot device to let her go?
I think he was just having fun.
Okay. He was just being kind of a troll.
Yeah.
And maybe he likes his reputation a little too much, and she's going to continue that reputation. But besides that, she ends up running the cinema, and we get to see her film something, talk about how difficult it is to get someone to process this film. They end up forcing someone to do it. And then we see her edit in film into the reel of the movie, the Nation's Pride movie they're going to show.
Yeah.
And we see the, what is it called? The cigarette mark. That tells you when it's time to change the reel. And this time around, I made the connection to Fight Club that I never made before. I was like, is he kind of pointing back to Fincher a little bit? Brad Pitt in Fight Club?
Well, there is a penis. If you pause.
Only in the one frame. But I was just like, Tarantino being the cinephile that he is, I felt like it just felt so appropriate to and not saying that it was a reference per se.
I don't think it's a reference to Fight Club, but Fight Club is referencing how old movie projectors work, and this movie is all about old movies.
Sure.
So, of course, that cigarette mark, the marker that you need to switch reels, is a play into that. I think they're both
I guess that was the
referencing-
first time that I learned about that thing was in Fight Club, so I
Right.
couldn't help, and I was like, oh, Brad Pitt's in this movie too. It just felt perfectly appropriate. But not to take away from Tarantino. What he's doing there with that scene is incredible. And
I think they're both playing off the same core of old cinema.
Sure.
And that being a part of it, right?
yeah.
And that's kind of the most crazy, if you really think about it, that is, she makes a movie inside a movie inside a movie. That's real Inception.
Yes.
Chris Nolan can suck it.
There it
Because he
is.
isn't working on Tarantino's level. You didn't realize that it was a movie inside a movie inside a movie until I just pointed it out. And that's the brilliance right there.
It's great.
But to your point, Christoph Waltz at actually 2 turns. I'm not sure if there's a third.
Lets people survive.
Lets her 3. What's the third one?
No, you were doing the 3, and
I'm doing the German 3.
visual gags for a podcast.
So we see Christoph Waltz let her run away, and he goes I do want to look up the translation. I'm not going to make us look up another translation. When he says "shala shali" or something like that, something very French and fun, like he does, right? And he lets her go, and he kind of has it aimed down her sights. And he's like, "Let's keep this going." Now, looking at it from the first scene, it's kind of like, well, if he gets her, then he's done with his job, and he kind of wants something to do. So that's how I read it, kind of in that first scene. Then in the second scene, when he meets her, he immediately knows who she is. He orders her milk,
right, exactly.
That, oh my gosh.
right? And then he says, wait for the cream. It's only good when you wait for the cream. And that scene, looking back, is kind of him telling the audience his plan, which is he knows, but he's gonna wait for the right moment. Take a bite, and then he puts the cigarette in. And it's funny that you said the cigarette mark, because he puts the cigarette in the cream. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like that moment of him just taking a shit on everything, and it kind of correlates with the tape reel. And so, yeah, I think he's very much and the first time I watched it, I never even thought of that. I was like, does he know? Does he know? And it's so clear. He immediately is like, this is my job. And I can tell.
Yeah, he's definitely in control of every scene that he's in. He knows everything that's going on. He knows all the players in the room. Definitely agree with you.
So why do you think he lets her live the first time?
I still read it as and it kind of falls in line with your reading of that particular scene. But I think he's just kind of like playing with his food in so many ways. I'm using quotation marks here. He just wants to have some fun. He doesn't want it to be finished, like he said. So the game must continue.
Yeah, and I guess that was, I think that he does say in that scene that they were the last family that was unaccounted for in France, or maybe in that section of France. And well, we don't have to transition into it right at this point. At the moment, I was thinking either it's kind of a plot device or he just didn't have a good shot. I think you guys are making good points though that I pretty much agree with. That yeah, he's probably just trying to continue the hunt. He very much seems to get off on what he's doing.
Yeah, he's very manipulative.
So this may be a good transition point to get into the next topic. But the movie starts off with Once Upon a Time in, is it southern France? I can't remember the...
Once Upon a Time in Nazi-occupied
France. Okay, and I was just like, how appropriate. We went off the timeline here in terms of chronological Tarantino movies, and I don't think this was the reason at all, but it felt so appropriate that this was the one we watched before.
And it's
Honestly,
also funny
guys,
because it starts off with Once Upon a Time, and the first thing I saw in that special, I'm going to link that little 9-minute YouTube video with Tarantino. He goes, it's not a fairy tale. And I'm like, that's probably why, because the original name of the film was supposed to be Once Upon a Time in Nazi-occupied France. That was the original name, and he changed it to just be a title, and I think it's because he didn't want this to be his demonic fairy tale. You know, he wanted this to be more of the I think he saw it. I think he had an idea, and then he saw it take shape into something else, and he kept that as like a tribute to the original concept. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is probably more of a dark fairy tale, if I was to wager a guess based on what he said.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see what he does with that film. And to be perfectly honest, the only reason I scheduled Inglourious Basterds this early in our Tarantino talks is because I just really wanted to watch this movie sooner rather than later. So,
I can't blame you.
No, I think it was this movie more than anything I've watched reminded me of what he's done lately and kind of the next phase of his career, which I think this was the beginning of Django and the upcoming film. So I think this is a good mark into the phase that we'll be talking about with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And it'll be cool to kind of go through Django again and then kind of go back and then ending very ceremoniously with with True Romance, which, spoiler alert, one of my favorite movies of all time, which was not directed by Tarantino but written.
right.
And it's his first like work that came to be, and I think we'll have a lot to talk about. I'm excited about that. But we're not talking about True Romance yet, so let's kind of go into our overall thoughts of the film, kind of in your first watch, this watch now. Do we have any lasting thoughts on kind of where this leaves the Tarantino legacy and what we think of it?
I think this shows that he is a master storyteller. If it wasn't clear, there's other parts of his movies can feel slightly disjointed. You can get potentially lost in the timeline. I don't think it affects how you watch the movies, but he's doing a lot of his old tricks. We get a couple of flashbacks, not too much time play outside of the flashbacks, which are, I think it may only be one scene, just an introduction of Stiglitz. I think he's the only character where we get the flashback.
Where we get Sam Jackson.
Doing
Right,
the narrator.
doing a
I didn't even
narration.
catch it until the second time he came in as the narrator. I was like, oh my gosh, of course it would be Samuel L. Jackson. But he's firing on all cylinders here. And to give such historical context while telling a clearly fictional story, this is what storytelling is about. You know, I think this is the true power, particularly on film, of what can be done. And like you said, going into Django after this, he deals with, two of humanity's most atrocious moments. And Django is another one that I've only watched once, and I'm so excited to come back to. Well, to some of it. Obviously, it's another one that's not particularly easy to watch.
Yeah, it's too much white guilt. This is like, I feel like this movie is probably what it feels like to. I'm wondering if Germans really like Django more than watching this.
Or maybe they don't watch either.
Because as a straight white male, watching Django is pretty rough. Even though none of my lineage. Well, no, that's not true. Never mind. I was about to say my father's father was not from this country and was way after slavery that day came. My mom's side, up for debate, and I think they've been here a while, so hard to say.
See, interestingly enough, I don't know if I've talked to you about this, Christian, but my grandma actually lived in Nazi-occupied France, and it's only later in her life, I want to say post 80 years old, did she ever talk to us about having grown up in that. And we're not going to get into that.
How did
right
she
now.
feel about Inglourious Basterds?
She's not big into films these days.
You should have showed her this.
I'm not going to show her this.
You got to show her this.
I'm not going to do that.
Oh,
No,
we need her
definitely
take.
not.
Why isn't she on the pod?
She has basically said that, like, yeah, this is a moment in her life that she can never forget, and that
Never wants to think about. Yeah,
exactly.
I can imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
I think she'd love it.
I mean, with that being said, this is a movie I've been trying to watch with my dad for probably 6 months, and watching it again, I'm like, my dad is going to absolutely love this movie. I'm so excited to show it to him.
Hey, we should, dude.
You trying to watch it?
Dude, let's watch it with our dads together, and then
I'm
do a
so
pod
down.
with our dads.
Dad pod.
Has your dad seen this
pod.
movie? Has Frank seen this movie?
I think he has seen this movie.
Yeah, your dad's cool. Your dad's
So
cool.
hip.
Your dad's so hip and
Mom
so cool.
loves Key and Peele. Dad loves Tarantino.
You know it, dude.
Conkling family's awesome.
Frank
So,
Gorlami Conklin.
Gorlami. All right.
Dominic
I'm bowing
DeCoco.
out.
Chris, final thoughts on the movie.
I mean, I think Brian said everything that I would have said as well. This is absolutely Tarantino's best. You know, I would even say that I enjoy this movie more than I enjoy Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs. This is him firing on all cylinders, 100%. And I am very excited to see what he does with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
You know, we use the phrase firing on all cylinders quite a lot on this show, and I would say none of us actually know what that means. I know it has something to do with cars,
Yes.
and the cylinders in cars.
I mean, if you got some cylinders, you want them all to be firing. I'm gonna go ahead.
Is that fifth gear? I don't. I thought only some of the cylinders fire at a time. I really don't know. I'm sure Tarantino will explain it in his upcoming film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I can't wait for this movie.
I'm very excited. But
To be functioning or operating at the most desirable or greatest possible level of efficiency, speed, or productivity.
No. I know what it means as a phrase. I just don't know what would be happening if you were firing on all cylinders. Again, is that fifth gear? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe
I have no idea.
Maybe it devolves from a factory.
When the car is firing on all cylinders, it is inflamed and non-functioning.
Yeah, that checked out.
No, I couldn't find what
See
it
a
actually.
doctor if it's inflamed, for sure.
I couldn't find what it actually
Overheating.
meant.
In fact, it's the worst thing that could possibly be happening to a car. Yeah, Inglorious Basterds is awesome. It gets better every time I watch it. It's hard. You know, once we get to the end of everything, we'll be talking about our favorite Tarantino films and kind of rating them. And everybody's waiting for our rating. People love ratings. They love getting a rating. And we're going to have like a BuzzFeed. Yeah, BuzzFeed.
Are you rating me right now?
Are you rating me? I'm going to rate you guys. Brian's number 1. I'm number 2. And Chris, I'm sorry. You are not firing on all cylinders.
I'm inflamed and non-functioning.
Damn it! I'm just kidding. I love you, man. I'm clearly number 1. So, yeah, this film it's tough to say, but it's like tough to like try and find the reasoning it wouldn't be my favorite Tarantino movie, especially thus far. It's just, you know, some of the as we talk about Jackie Brown, I think Jackie Brown and Hateful Eight have similar problems of the tensity that these scenes have. Some of those scenes do not have, and maybe for just the right storytelling reasons, and it's just not as appealing and entertaining to watch. And maybe that's what I'm struggling with is like, what am I enjoying more? But, you know, this movie doesn't drift like Tarantino can drift away at points. It's kind of perfectly paced, and just, it's like every dialogue scene is like two swordsmen going at each other. I equated a scene in Jackie Brown to like a lightsaber duel, and it's crazy how he can make dialogue scenes action scenes, and then his action scenes are just like almost like just brutal, violent flashes, right? So
yeah.
It's all the reasons that I've said and more. It's pretty great. It's pretty good. Don't have much bad to say about it. Fun fact too, Eli Roth directed the Nation's Pride film that you see. He actually directed that.
Did he?
Which is pretty hilariously bad because every shot is just... It's funny because every shot they show is just a shot of someone just getting shot in the face. Like,
right.
It is a very boring movie. Like, from what we see, it is pretty terrible.
except for the shot of Brule's character carving a swastika into the ground, at which point the audience bursts into applause.
Right, but
It's just so silly.
I think it's an indictment on nationalism in general because I have seen many an American film in which the American flag is depicted in the same way, right?
Sure.
And so it is a call out on this. I struggle with this on like national pride, which is it's a tricky thing to talk about, and probably something I should have brought up an hour ago when I hadn't had so many Schnaffenhofers. But I think it is. I saw it most, especially this time around, an indictment on just pure nationalism, which isn't really reading too deep into it. But when he's carving the swastika, I saw I don't know why, but I was like, if it's an American flag, it's just as silly. It's just as ridiculous. And the crowd's reaction to it, when you see this right now, you see this kind of this devotion. It's very scary. Let's end on a bummer for this fun movie. But that's what's so great about the movie, is that it's like very true. It's very fun. It's very violent, very brutal. And I think it makes you feel good about the violence and also bad. I was recoiling at some of it and also very, very happy at others. Hitler getting his face blown off very violently is never going to not be.
It's a great moment.
It's, insanely satisfying.
And I think sums up what really the master stroke of this film is that the whole idea is that with the power of cinema, we can live out how we can change the way we see the world in very strong ways. And that's clear in the use of propaganda footage in cinema. It's clear of her interjecting herself and becoming almost this Wizard of Oz, laughing voice of death to the Nazis.
Wow, I didn't make the Wizard of Oz connection. Her cackling on screen with the flames is
she's
totally like the witch, the Wicked Witch in the Wizard of Oz.
Literally,
Wow.
the Nazis burned from like 30 millimeter film, and so this film, this movie's all, and it's all the dialogue is in tribute to cinema and movies. We mentioned that scene with the Bear Jew. He goes, "This is the closest thing we get to watching movies." It's debated back to that. They're constantly talking about directors, and one of the main characters is an actress, and so. This film is a love letter to the power of film in both its, use of evil and misinformation, and also its empowerment to people that are trying to be silenced, and gives voice to those. So, that's what makes it special for us. I think for me as a movie lover, those who love movies, is that it really is a love letter to movies as well, and how powerful they are. And even a broader scope, if movies aren't your thing, you can just substitute art. Like it is about
there you go.
The power of art for good and for evil, and the fact that it takes place in historical context is how we're like, you know what? We didn't get to shoot Hitler in the face with a submachine gun, but with the power of film, baby, we can make it happen.
Run it back.
Very cool. So that is Inglourious Basterds. We want to know what you guys think. Go ahead and email us at popaholicscast@gmail.com. Go ahead and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. Leave your review with us. Leave us 5 stars. We'd really appreciate it. Very much so. Guys, anything else?
I just want to do a quick plug, if you don't mind.
Hey!
Oh, Brian's got a plug.
Little plug
Hey,
cast.
plug us up, baby. Plug us up and let us go.
I will be joining James Barnes on his Patreon podcast called Best One, Worst One. So he hosts a podcast called Careful for Spoilers, which is also very great. And they release 1 episode a month for a bonus pod that he's doing called Best One, Worst One, where they dive into different either actors' careers, directors' careers, or sets of films. The most recent one that just came out was Child's Play. It was another great episode. I think it was episode 9 or so at this point. So on Monday the 29th, they will be releasing an episode that I will be on about Stanley Kubrick. And loyal listeners will know I am a bit obsessed with this and am super excited to dig into the best and worst, in my opinion, of his oeuvre. So yeah, that'll be out Monday, and I'm not sure if that'll be one of the ones that gets released for non-patrons, but I would recommend for $3 a month you can subscribe and get access to all the episodes of this podcast. It's more than worth it. James Barnes is doing a lot of great work. He does articles as well as episodes about all sorts of movies, anime, and it's another great show, and I'm sure we'll have him back on at some point as well.
Definitely.
Very
That's
cool.
very exciting.
That's Careful for Spoilers, Best One, Worst One.
Best One,
podcast.
Worst One. That's
Absolutely.
it.
That's really exciting. Look forward to that. You can find more of my music by going to midnightsatire.bandcamp.com or searching for Midnight Satire on your favorite streaming service of choice. We are everywhere officially. You can look at the album Bad Karaoke, my most recent release of Amarillo by Morning, which is a cover. For the whole Pop-O-Holics team, guys, thanks for being here. And listeners, thanks for listening. Look forward to next week's episode. We'll be talking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Guys, this has been an episode of Pop-O-Holics. I think we're going to go out speaking the Kings.
Well, if this is it, old boy, I hope you don't mind if I go out speaking the Kings.
By all means, Captain.
There's a special rung in hell reserved for people who waste good scotch. Seeing as I may be rapping on the door momentarily. I must say, damn good stuff, sir. Now, about this pickle we find ourselves in. It would appear there's only one thing left for you to do.
And what would that be?
Stiglitz.
Say auf Wiedersehen to your Nazi boss.
Say auf Wiedersehen to your Nazi balls.
That's a line in a serious movie.
Stiglitz.
Auf Wiedersehen to your Nazi balls. Just hit the mic on the way out. Clean landed, boys.
Sorry. I'm so sweaty.